Chapter 30. The animals gaped at me in astonishment. Even the youngest babies knew about the don't talk to people rule. Bongo darted to my top branch. "Red," she cried out in a strangled whisper, "you can't." "Oh, but I can," I said. "What have I got to lose?" But, as I was saying, I returned my attention to Stefan and Samar. They were staring at me, jaws dropped, eyes wide, as frozen as flash had been not long ago. "We're dreaming," Stefan murmured. "Right?" At the same time, Samar asked, "Is that possible?" "Pinch me," Stefan said. Samar complied. "Definitely felt that," Stefan reported. "Maybe it was a dream pinch," Samar suggested. "Excuse me," I interrupted. "I have 216 rings worth of wisdom to convey, and not much time." Stefan reached for Samar's hand. "If it's a dream," he said, "at least it's a cool one." And so I began. Chapter 31. I haven't always been a wish tree. It happened in 1848, long before I was surrounded by concrete and cars. When I was just a few decades old, still a youngster by Red Oak standards, no longer a lanky sapling, I was solid and strong, but not anchored to the earth the way I am now. This was a time, like many others, when hungry, desperate people sailed on crowded boats to settle here. Many of them ended up, as they always seemed to, in my neighborhood. The blue and green houses were brown then, and filled to overflowing with new arrivals. Sometimes the newcomers were welcomed, sometimes they were not. But still they came, hoping and wishing, as people always do. One of our new residents was a young Irish girl named Maeve. She voyaged across the Atlantic with her 19-year-old brother who died of dysentery during the trip. Their mother had passed away shortly after Maeve was born, their father, when the children were 9 and 12. Maeve was solid and plain, but when she smiled, it was like sunshine peeking through the clouds. She had a deep laugh, and her hair was as brilliantly red as my finest autumn attire. 16, alone, and penniless, Maeve shared a tiny room with 5 other immigrants. She worked night and day, cleaning and cooking and doing whatever she could to stay alive. Maeve soon discovered she was gifted at caring for the sick. She had no special knowledge, no secret remedies, but she was kind and patient, and she knew how to soothe a fevered brow with a cool cloth as well as anyone. What she didn't know, she was willing to learn. As time passed, word grew of Maeve's abilities. People brought her their sick piglets and their lame horses, their coughing children and fretful babies. Always, she explained, she wasn't sure she could help. But since people in the neighborhood were too poor to go to a doctor, they turned to Maeve. And since people believed she could help them get better, Maeve tried to live up to their hopes. When she succeeded, and even when she didn't, patients and their families would leave small tokens for her. A whittled figurine of a bird, a hairpin, half a loaf of bread. Once someone even left a leather-covered journal with a tiny silver key that opened its lock. When Maeve was out tending to someone who was sick, people took to leaving their thank yous in my lowest hollow. It was still a fresh wound, just a couple of seasons mended, but because it faced the house where Maeve roamed, and not the street, it was a safe place to leave a token of gratitude. That's when I realized that hollows can be a good thing for people, not just birds and animals. Little did I know just how good. Chapter 32. The years passed, and Maeve became as connected to the neighborhood as I was, even as newcomers from other lands added their music and food and language to our little part of the world. No matter where people were from, Maeve cared for them as best she could. I grew tougher, my older limbs less pliable, my shadow longer. More trees and shrubs joined me, but there was plenty of sun for all of us, and we never wanted for water. I hosted many families by then, mice and chipmunks in particular. My closest confidant was a young gray squirrel named Squibbles. All squirrels' names begin with the letter S-Q-U. Squibbles was especially fond of Maeve, who often fed the little squirrel table scraps. Privately, Squibbles and I worried about Maeve. Along the way, Maeve had seen a suitor or two, but nothing much came out of those flirtations. She had friends aplenty and work to do from dawn until dusk. Still, she seemed lonely. Sometimes Maeve would sit on the porch steps, watching happy families stroll past, and her eyes would well up with tears. At night she'd gaze out an open upstairs window, and her sighs would float to us on the breeze, melancholy as the call of a mourning dove. Often Maeve would sit at the base of my trunk and write in her journal. Now and then she'd read passages aloud. She spoke about the Irish countryside fading into fog. She spoke about her family she'd lost. She spoke about her secret hopes and fears and longings. She had love to give and no one to give it to. Maeve adored early mornings when the world was bathed in mists and the sun was still a promise. She would lean against my trunk and close her eyes and hum a tune from her childhood. One day, the first day of May, Maeve joined me at dawn. To my surprise, she reached up to my lowest brow and gently tied a scrap of blue striped fabric in a careful knot. "I wish," she whispered, "for someone to love with all my heart." That was my first wish, and the beginnings of many more. Chapter 33. As the weeks passed, the piece of fabric on my branch drew many comments. Some of the folks in our neighborhood, the ones from Ireland, would nod knowingly and smile. To them Maeve would simply say in her lilting voice, "That's my raggedy tree. She's not a hawthorn, but she'll do just fine." People who'd come here from other lands, and there were many of them, would frown at the rag or even reach up to remove it. Maeve would warn, "Don't you be touching my wish now." Patiently, again and again, she would explain how in her old home, leaving wishes on a raggedy tree was a time-honored tradition. Now and then people would ask Maeve what she wished for. She'd tell them the truth with a sigh and a wry smile. Nothing much, just someone to love with all my heart. Nothing much at all. Sometimes people would laugh. Sometimes they would roll their eyes. "A wish on a rag won't bring you love, dearie," they would say. But usually people gave Maeve a kind smile, a squeeze on the arm, a knowing nod. And then they too would ask if they could add a wish of their own. Chapter 34. Another year passed. As May neared, I found myself hosting more scraps of fabric than building leaves. Squibbles tried to steal a few fabric strips to line his dray, the nest made of leaves and twigs high in one of my forked branches. I explained he'd have to stick with moss and pine needles until the 1st of May. Wishes, according to Maeve, could not be touched until after May Day. Then the ones that weren't carried off in the wind or dragged to the ground by the rain could be removed by people or by enterprising squirrels. I suspect she made up that rule for my benefit, so I could grow unfettered without the weight of wet rags dragging me down. Just before dawn on the 1st of May, a young woman approached me. She had dark wavy hair and wore a tattered gray coat. In her arms was a wrapped bundle. "Psst," Squibbles whispered to me. "Here comes another wish, Red." But Squibbles was wrong. There was no wish. Swiftly, but with great care, the girl placed her bundle in my hollow. A thank you for Maeve, I realized. A loaf of bread, perhaps. The girl had probably been one of her patients. She was gone as quickly as she'd come. Like a hummingbird, I thought. There, and then not there. Like a gust of wind. Chapter 35. Just a few minutes later, Maeve opened the door of the little brown house. She smiled at me and at the scraps waving in the early morning breeze. And then came the cry. Wail was more like it. Coming from me. Not the meek peep of a wren chick. Not the shy squawk of a mouse pup. No, this was the cry of a righteous indignation. This was a baby. Chapter 36. The baby had a note attached to her blanket. Haltingly, Maeve tried to read it out loud. "Italian," she murmured. Only later, when she consulted one of her patients, did she understand its meaning. "Please give her the care I cannot. I wish for you both a life of love." The baby's hair was black. Maeve's was red. The baby's eyes were brown. Maeve's were blue. The baby was Italian. Maeve was Irish. They were made for one another. Maeve named the baby Amadora, which meant in Italian, the gift of love. Chapter 37. Many in the neighborhood didn't approve of an unmarried Irish woman raising an abandoned Italian baby. People talked as they will, and they tss as they must. Some people were even angry. They said hurtful things. They told Maeve that Amadora didn't belong. They told Maeve that she and the baby should leave. Maeve merely smiled, held Amadora close, and waited and hoped. On dark nights, when hope was scarce, she would sing an old Irish tune mixed with newer Italian song that she had learned from a neighbor. The melody was sweet, the words were silly. The effect was always the same, a smile from little Amma. Sure enough, the longer Maeve waited, the kinder people grew. And before long, Amma, as she came to be called, was as much a part of our messy garden as the rest of us. When Amma was old enough to feed Squibbles and his family, she did. When she was strong enough to climb me, she did. And when she was ready to make wishes of her own, she did. Amma grew up steady and honest and kind like her mother, and had babies of her own, and then grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Eventually, Amma and her husband bought a little brown house, the one right next to it, and painted them blue and green. Years later, they purchased a house across the street and began to rent the blue and green houses to other families. The family grew and prospered, argued and failed and loved and laughed. Always and forever, the laughter kept them going. And when Amma's grandson had a little girl, he chose a fine Italian name for her, with a fine Irish middle name, Francesca Maeve. And that's the end for today. Thank you.